This is one of those things that if you don't fix it, it could sink your boat. Hi, I'm Joe, and welcome to MotorCity Boat Works. Let's get to work. If you're new to the channel, I'd like to welcome you, and if you're one of our returning viewers, welcome back to the Works. This week, I'm going to be talking about a very interesting boat project that has to do with the engine room vents on my Albin 27 pocket trawler. The Albin 27 family cruiser came with a series of cutouts on the sides of the hull of the boat. There's two per side, and they are the engine room air vents. These openings in the hull of the boat provide air and some cooling to the diesel engine that's down inside the boat. They're covered by a series of louvers, plastic louvers that go on the outside of the hull. But there's nothing that prevents water or any sort of rain or spray from entering the engine compartment and ultimately flooding the boat. This is one of those projects that presented itself during some of the live streams I've been conducting from the Boat Works. It just can't be overlooked. Something's got to be done. This is the side of the hull, right? On either side of the boat, there are two sets of vents, these two cutouts here, and they go straight down inside the engine compartment of the boat, right? And the original vents that were on there when it came from the factory were these little chintzy plastic jobbers. They just went right on here, and that's all there was to it. Now, this presents a problem because if anybody who's a sailor or a big boater, you know you get out there, and even if you're in enclosed waters on a bay or a lake or something like that, you can have some serious water, some serious waves, and you might very well get water up inside the boat. This is just 2.5 foot freeboard here from the water line to where these vents are. You take a big wave on the side of this boat, and listen, there's a lot of water gonna get dumped inside this engine compartment. While the engine is raised up inside there, and it'll be on its own engine bed, you know, and there's tankage and all kinds of stuff down there for fresh water and gray water, black water, all this stuff. You don't want seawater in there with your engine. So I was noodling around some ideas about how to fix this, and it's really not a very good design, but it is quite common on trawlers and especially for boats that are more designed for inland waterways and coastal cruising. It's not a blue water boat, but nevertheless, we want to try and do something to make sure that this thing can take a little bit of water and not have serious problems. I did some research and I found out that they make this, right? This is a replacement for those factory air vents. This comes from a company called Atwood Marine. It's very similar to what was on there from the factory, but this is quite a bit more robust and heavier plastic. Now, I want to remind you, I have no sponsors. I get no compensation for talking about any of the brands or items that I show on my YouTube channel. But you must have some sponsors. No, somebody must be sponsoring you. No sponsors at all. You don't have any sponsors? None. Are you sure you don't have any sponsors? No sponsors. Seems like you might have a sponsor. I am beholden to no man. Also, you'll notice on the back side, the profile, it's squared off and not round like it was on the other one. If you watch the first live stream, you'll see that. You'll notice that I spent this week cutting these square so that this will fit inside there. Man, that looks great, right? Now, here you'll notice that I sanded down parts of the hull here. The beauty about having a painted boat is that if you make a mistake or you don't like something or you want to change something, you sand it down, you fix it with fiberglass or whatever, and then you just paint over it. I sanded this area down right here because there, in this particular spot, I'm not sure why, perhaps it's an anomaly to the original fiberglass mold, but there is a slight camber fore to aft. And what that means is when you put the vent on here, before I did this, it rocked a little bit, right? Because it didn't have a lot of support over here, and it didn't have a lot of support over here. There's a high spot in the center, in particular on the bottom here. So I sanded this down a little bit. They make a Dorade box for these Atwood vents. Boom. Now, you might not be familiar with this term, but a dorade refers to a box that usually goes on the bottom or the backside of a vent on the deck of a boat. They were invented around the 1930s by a naval architect named Olin Stevens of the famous Sparksman and Stevens. And he designed a two-masted boat that used these type of dorade boxes to provide ventilation to the interior of the boat. It was kind of revolutionary at the time, and now they're very common on small craft and sailboats. The purpose of the dorade box is to allow air to come in and out of the vent, but at the same time, try and provide a barrier to prevent water from coming inside the boat.
Now, what this is a plastic box. It's ABS plastic. It's very lightweight. It goes on the back here, and there's two cutouts. Can you see there's two cutouts here. You put a 3-inch hose on here, air vent hose. You bring it down below, this and that. But problem is, that son of a gun won't fit inside here because the back of the box is in the way.
I mean, why would you design a boat like that?
You know how much this thing costs? Can you imagine how much this thing costs? Try $39. $39! Look how thin that is. Oh, Atwood, you're doing me dirty. It's so wrong. How can you charge $39 for one of these? For $39, I can't buy one, take it apart, or modify it. It's too expensive to do that 4 times over. So I bought one. I bought this one kind of as a proof of concept, and also to create a mold, a plug, so I can make this out of fiberglass. And that's my plan.
Today we're working on the engine vents. I've been enlarging the holes a little bit so that we can put in the new engine vent covers. These are some aftermarket ones that I purchased. They replaced the original engine vent plastic covers. And I'm also working on the engine vent cover Dorade boxes. This is what's going to prevent water from flooding into the engine compartment. So what I want to show you here is kind of a tip that I come up with on how to do this. You know, these are the vent holes here, and the Dorade box is going to fit inside there. And the concern is that we don't want too much of a gap. When we put the vent in here, we don't want there to be too much of a gap all the way around. So what I've come up with is I hold the vent up here, and then I kind of mark where it's binding up with a black line, with a black pen. And then I'll kind of connect this with a straight edge to get an idea of what it looks like I need to take off. And then using the snake, I can grind down right to that line and kind of create more room, then come back. This way I know I don't go too far. I can come back, put the vents on here, see if it's still binding up, put another line, work my way down. Through a series of successive black lines like this, I can kind of gently take off material, work my way down. That way I don't end up with too big a gap. You know, just like a dentist or something, you know, you might start grinding away and accidentally you grind something you're not supposed to. It'll be impossible to put it back. This way we can work it very slowly. It's tedious, but that's the way to do it. I've got to come up with a way to create my own Dorade box that'll go on the backside of one of these Atwood vent covers. Sometimes there are parts you need, but you've got to fabricate them. And this is the process I use with fiberglass. So what I've got to do is I've got to figure out a way to cut down the Dorade box depth so that it's a little bit shallower, and then somehow put it back together to make a plug that the fiberglass can lay over to create my fiberglass. This is a great example of typical mistake in the shop. I don't know what I was thinking. You know, I make the videos, everything looks all sexy, it looks like he knows what he's doing, and then I do stupid stuff like this. So this is the Dorade box for the engine room vents, right? And I made 2 measurements on here. I don't know if you can see them. There's 2 measurements, 2 lines. One line is for the starboard side. One line is for the port side of the boat. The depth on the port side of the boat that the box can fit, the depth is quite a bit is like a ½ inch more, 3/4 of an inch more than it is on the starboard side. So what this means is that when I make the Dorade boxes off of this mold here, which is going to become a plug, when I try to make them out of fiberglass, I was going to make 2 from the port side and then 2 different ones from the starboard side. And they will both have different depths. And the reason is to try and maximize the amount of air and ventilation that the engine compartment's getting. I started cutting. I was supposed to be making the port side first, which is the deeper box, but I cut at the wrong line. Oh. And of course I'm filming and I realized it halfway through. So now I've got to, I should probably make them all standard, make them the same size. I don't know. Is it worth it for a ½ inch? It's a ½ inch, right? I want to make sure that I take a moment to point out that my boat, the Albin 27, it has a diesel engine. This is different than if your boat is powered by a gasoline engine. There are very specific rules and regulations from the US Coast Guard about what type of ventilation and how much you have to have if you have a gasoline engine. For diesel engines, those rules don't apply. But still, we need to make sure that there's enough oxygen being pulled into the engine compartment so that the engine runs properly and that it also gets some cooling from the circulation of air. Building the plug for the Dorade boxes was a simple matter of cutting down that plastic box, reducing its depth, and then I went ahead and I just used Gorilla duct tape to kind of put this thing back together and create the sides and fill in any holes or gaps. Once the box was kind of all put together with the Gorilla tape, I then sprayed it with a releasing agent. Now there's lots of different brands on the market and some work better than others. This happens to be the first time I've used this product, but it worked pretty well. It's silicone based and I had no problem getting the fiberglass to kind of pop off of the plug later on in the process. If you like this channel and you've learned something new, do me a favor, hit the like button and click subscribe. That way you'll be sure to get all of my future videos and even some of my special ones when I stream live. Thanks again. I'm working inside here. The temperature's a little more controlled. And what I've done in the art studio is I've set up a table with some plastic over the top of it. This is actually underlayment for putting down a floor. It's left over from another DIY project that I was doing. And so it makes a good nonstick surface to kind of work off of. This is what we're going to be creating. This is what I've created so far. This is after 2 fiberglass go-arounds, and hopefully we'll do a better job the next time. But basically what I've done is I've taken some fiberglass, biaxial fiberglass cloth and cut it into various shapes and strips, which I'll need to have handy when it comes time to start laying the fiberglass over the plug. And I've got 2 different weights of fiberglass here. One is really lightweight, 0.75, 3/4 of an ounce, and another one is 1 ounce. This is just for the initial layer, and then eventually what I'll do is I'll build up and we'll move on to 6 or 7 ounce fiberglass, which will really give it its stiffness and make it nice and hard like this. Now the reason I use West System epoxy is because, well, frankly, I started using it about 30 some years ago when I first started working on boats, and I had my first sailboat, a Sunfish sailboat. And it was what was available at West Marine, but over the years I've come to really kind of enjoy using this product. Why? Because it's very, very consistent and it basically performs the same every single time. If you follow their literature and their instructions and you use their pump systems for your mixing and ratios and things like that, it's almost kind of foolproof and anybody can do it. Now the downside of using West System epoxy is that it is expensive. It's an epoxy resin, unlike say a vinyl ester or polyester or other type of resin that you might have out there. Those are going to be considerably cheaper, maybe 1/3 the cost of what West System costs. But for superior performance and the things that you can do with it, kind of overall in a boat building projects, it just makes sense to go with West System epoxy. This is the 3 stages of the engine room Dorade boxes. We've got the first stage, which is where I basically put very lightweight fiberglass cloth over the plug, and that's going to give us the general shape of the box. The fabric on this first step is only 1 ounce, maybe even less than that, and it's just to catch the corners and to kind of get the general shape that we're going for. If your releasing agent is working properly, you should be able to work around the edges and then very gently pop the layer of fabric off of the mold, and of course then trim it up so you can see if you captured the proper shape. The second step is going to be putting the 7-ounce biaxial cloth on top of the first go with the fiberglass, right? So on top of the very lightweight fiberglass, once it's cured, we go ahead and put the 7-ounce, and that's what this looks like right here. This gives the rigidity to the actual box. We want to try and make sure the corners are as tight as possible. We're going to sand down all the meat hooks afterwards and take us to the final stage. The final stage is now we have a rigid shape, and it's relatively smooth because it's been sanded and all the meat hooks are taken off. And if we want to, we go back and maybe put in a little bit of epoxy resin mixed with a low density fairing compound to kind of smooth everything out if we want to. We'll hit it again and we'll sand that, and now we'll have our final fiberglass piece. At this stage, the only thing we have to do is cut the holes in the top of the Dorade box and figure out how it's going to marry to the engine room vent cover. All right, so what we've got here is we've got various stages of the fiberglassing process for these Dorade boxes, and it looks like this. So we start here. This is the first form. This is the mold that we had made, and we covered it with duct tape. We put the mold release agent on it. Then we put on 1 ounce of fiberglass and kind of created the first form, right? And it's very lightweight, super flexible, but it captures these dimensions kind of as close as possible. Then from that, we moved on to 7-ounce mat, which you can see here is all kind of rough because, of course, you know, it overextends and then you trim it down to fit properly. This has a lot of meat hooks and stuff in it. These things will poke your hands and just draw blood. They're terrible. And then from the 7-ounce form, we move on to this is what it looks like once it's kind of finished out. It's cut and smooth and lightly sanded. All the meat hooks are gone. And now, of course, it's rigid, right? And plenty hard. And then from that, we kind of go, we do some little bit of filling just to kind of smooth it out a little more, get it all ready for its final hole cut. One of the things you'll notice is on this final fiberglass form is that there's a line that I have drawn on it, and that's because I'm thinking about cutting the form in half in order to kind of close up, squash the dimensions to make it fit a little bit tighter on the engine vent cover. And this is because I failed to realize that the initial Dorade box was actually larger than the back of those vents. It's not a super tight fit. And as you create these forms, well, that dimension gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and now there's about a 1/4 inch gap that I really am thinking about taking up.
It's a little bit loud because I've got the vacuum cleaner running, but I wanted to show you how I'm doing this and something that I set up to kind of control the dust when I'm sanding fiberglass. So I'm working on the vent hood Dorade boxes, right? This is fiberglass. And now you can see, of course, when you get done doing the fiberglass, there's all these rough edges on here. I call them meat hooks.
they will stick you in your hands and really painful. So you got to take those down. Now you can use a chopper, you can use a variety of other things, but in this case, you know, we like to use the snake, and it's real surgical, and you can get in there and just kind of take down the meat hooks and preserve as much material as possible. But when you're doing that, it generates a lot of dust. And so the way you get rid of the dust is we hook up the big gulp. And the big gulp is a giant hood here. It's connected to the vacuum cleaner, and it kind of creates like a positive airflow, and will kind of suck the dust in that direction. Now it doesn't get all of it, but it does keep it from kind of going aerosol inside the room, and then I can come back later on and I can vacuum up, you know, using the regular vacuum cleaner. So that's why we got the dust, the big gulp going here. I use it on the deck sometimes when I'm grinding and making the limber holes, and it's fantastic because it just kind of pulls all the loose dust in the air in one direction, pulls it right into the vacuum cleaner.
So the last step in actually building the Dorade boxes is to add the holes that will serve as the vents. And to do that, I use a hole saw bit that I put in the drill press. I'm using about 1 1/8 to 1 1/4 hole saw. Any rough edges are cleaned up using the snake, and now the Dorade boxes are ready for paint. After all that, I've finally got 4 Dorade boxes that match the back of the Atwood vents, and they're ready to be installed in my Albin 27 pocket trawler.
Now it's taken a little bit of work to get to this point, but I feel a lot better knowing that there's some type of protection to prevent water from just pouring into the engine compartment. It's still a little cold in the shop, so I won't be able to paint the hull just yet, but I've got everything sanded down and prepped and ready to receive the vents. Let's see how they fit. Oh! Ho-ho! It looks pretty good. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, hit the like button and leave a comment. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this project. I'll be back again soon with another video on the progress on my Albin 27. In the meantime, if you're interested, check out the live streams that I sometimes do from the boat Werks. It's kind of a behind-the-scenes look at the process and going about putting the boat back together. It's a chance for you to interact with me. There's a chat feature, you can ask questions, and you can see what's going on behind the scenes. Check out the playlist if you've missed any of the past episodes, and we'll see you again next time. Stay motivated.